Today we uncover the shocking truth about UK supermarkets and the decades-long deception they've been running on British families. While Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrisons, Waitrose and Lidl have spent billions convincing you they're the guardians of fresh, healthy farm-to-table food, the reality couldn't be further from that carefully crafted image. These corporations have built empires worth hundreds of billions of pounds by keeping you dependent on their system, and they've done it by selling you an illusion. The smiling farmers on the packaging, the rolling green hills in the adverts, the promises of quality and freshness, it's all been designed to make you trust them while they prioritize one thing above everything else: profit. The average British household now spends over £600 every single month at supermarkets, and in return, you're getting food that's travelled thousands of miles, being treated with pesticides and chemicals you can't even pronounce, and being stored for weeks or months before it ever reaches your plate. Meanwhile, these same companies are posting record profits year after year. Tesco made over £2.8 billion in profit in 2023 alone. Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrisons, they're all raking it in while British farmers struggle to survive, and families across the country watch their food bills climb higher every month. And here's the part that should make you angry. For decades, the British public has been told that this is just how food works, that you need these supermarkets, that growing your own is too difficult or too time-consuming or not worth the effort. They've convinced entire generations that food only comes from their shelves, and in doing so, they've stripped away the knowledge and independence that our grandparents took for granted. But that illusion is cracking. More and more people are waking up to the fact that they've been hoodwinked, that the system isn't designed to serve them, and that there's another way. So here's what we're doing today. We're exposing the 30 crops that you can grow at home in British back gardens that will frustrate the supermarkets the most. That'll genuinely reduce how much you're handing to the supermarkets. Not rare permaculture plants, but the actual vegetables, fruits and herbs you're already buying every single week. These are the ones that'll save you real money, the ones that'll prove to you very quickly that you don't need to rely on Tesco or Sainsbury's for everything. And once the habit starts, it'll only grow generation by generation if we pass down the knowledge. So we're going through 30 main crops, the staples that replace real meals, the expensive fresh items that drain your wallet every week, the winter hardy crops that keep producing when nothing else will, and the perennials that you plant once and harvest for years. But before we dive in, I need you to do something right now. If you believe it's time for ordinary British families to take back even a small piece of control over their food, if you're tired of watching billion-pound corporations profit, laughing at both the farmers and consumers, then hit that hype button. Not just the like button, the hype button. That button sends a message. It tells YouTube this matters, that people are ready for content that actually helps them be self-sufficient, instead of just selling them more things. Every single person who hits hype pushes this video to more families who need to see it. More people who've had enough of being taken for granted, people who just need that little push to get started in being more independent. There are thousands of households who deserve to be reminded that they've got options beyond just handing over hundreds of pounds every month to companies that don't care about them. This is how we create pressure. When enough families start growing even a few things at home, when enough people stop buying overpriced salad bags and herb pots and fruit punnets every week, it'll start a snowball effect which will hit the supermarkets where it hurts them most. Their entire model depends on you coming back week after week, and when you don't, their bottom line suffers. That's when they have to change. So hit that hype button right now, not just for yourself, but for every family that's been misled, every household that deserves better, every person who's ready to take a step toward independence. And let's get into it. Number 30. Potatoes. This is the crop that matters most emotionally and practically. Potatoes are one of the most British things you can grow, and they're also one of the most useful. A bag of seed potatoes costs around £3 and will give you enough to plant several rows or a handful of large containers. By the end of summer, you'll be harvesting 2 to 3 sacks of potatoes that'll store in a cool, dark shed or garage from autumn right through to spring. That's months of a genuine staple food just sitting there, ready whenever you need it, and you didn't pay a supermarket a single penny for it. You can grow potatoes in the ground, in raised beds, or in large bags on a patio or balcony, which makes them accessible even for people with very small outdoor spaces. They're also fun to grow because there's something deeply satisfying about digging them up, and kids absolutely love it because it feels like treasure hunting. Potatoes from supermarkets are cheap, there's no denying that, but homegrown potatoes taste completely different. They can be waxy or fluffy depending on which variety you choose, and the flavor is richer and fuller because they haven't been sitting in cold storage for months on end. More importantly, potatoes are real food. They're not a garnish or an afterthought. They're the backbone of meals, mash, roasties, chips, jacket potatoes, boiled potatoes, whatever you're cooking, you need them. Growing your own means you've taken one of the biggest staples off your weekly shopping list, and that's a genuinely significant step toward reducing your dependence on supermarkets. Number 29. Onions from sets. Most people skip onions because they think they're cheap enough in the shops, so why bother? Here's why. A bag of onion sets costs about £3 and gives you enough to plant a full row or a large container. Those onions will be ready by summer, and once you've harvested them, they'll store in a cool, dry spot from autumn all the way through to the following spring. You're talking about 6 to 8 months of having onions on hand without spending another penny. Compare that to buying a bag of onions every week or two, and the savings add up fast. Onions are used in nearly everything in British cooking, so having your own supply means you're never making a trip to the shop just because you've run out. The key is growing from sets instead of seeds. Sets are baby onions that have already started, and they're incredibly easy for beginners. You just push them into the soil in spring, keep the bed weeded, and by July or August you're pulling up onions that'll last you half the year. They don't need much space, they don't need constant attention, and they give you a genuine staple crop that you'd otherwise be buying constantly. Plant them, let them grow, harvest them, store them, and enjoy months of not needing to buy onions. Number 28. Garlic. If you've looked at the price of a decent bulb of garlic recently, you'll understand why this one made the list. A single bulb can easily cost over £1, and if you cook with garlic regularly, you're going through several bulbs a month. That adds up to serious money over a year. Growing garlic is absurdly easy. You plant individual cloves in autumn, leave them in the ground over winter, and harvest whole bulbs the following summer. That's genuinely all there is to it. No watering through winter, no feeding, no fussing, just plant and wait. One clove becomes an entire bulb, so a pack of seed garlic for around £5 gives you enough to plant dozens of cloves. By harvest time, you've got bulbs that'll store for months in a cool, dry place, and the flavour is far superior to anything you'll find in a supermarket. Garlic takes up almost no space, fits easily between other plants, and requires virtually nothing from you. It's one of those crops where the return is so obvious that once you've grown it, you'll wonder why you ever bothered buying it. Just stick the cloves in the ground, walk away, and come back in summer to harvest. Number 27. Peas. Peas are perfect for British gardens because they actually prefer cooler weather, which means they thrive in our springs and autumns. They climb so they don't take up much ground space, and they're incredibly rewarding to grow because you can watch the pods forming and know exactly when they're ready to pick. The more you harvest, the more they produce, so a row or trellis of peas can keep giving you fresh pods for several weeks. If you've got children, this is one of the few vegetables they'll actually pick and eat straight off the plant, which is a minor miracle. Peas also improve your soil. They're nitrogen fixers, meaning they pull nitrogen from the air and store it in nodules on their roots. When the plants finish and die back, that nitrogen is released into the soil, making it richer for whatever you plant next. So you're not just getting food, you're actively improving your garden. Frozen peas are cheap in supermarkets, that's true, but fresh peas are a completely different story. The sweetness starts to fade within hours of picking, which means supermarket fresh peas are never truly fresh. If you want peas that actually taste sweet and tender, you grow them yourself and eat them the same day. Number 26. Broad beans. Broad beans are as British as it gets, and they're one of the earliest crops you can harvest each year. They're often ready in late spring or early summer, well before most other vegetables have even started producing. That early timing is valuable because it means your garden is already paying you back, while everything else is still growing. Broad beans are also ridiculously easy. You can sow them in autumn for an extra early crop or in early spring for a summer harvest. And they don't demand much. Give them halfway decent soil, maybe a bit of support if they're in an exposed spot, and they'll produce heavy pods full of beans. Like peas, they're nitrogen fixers, so they're enriching your soil while they grow. The beans themselves are brilliant in salads, risottos, or simply steamed with butter. A lot of people say they don't like broad beans, but that's usually because they've only had the big floury ones that were left on the plant too long. Picked young and small, broad beans are sweet, tender, and taste nothing like the ones you'd get frozen from a shop. If you want your garden to start giving back early in the season, broad beans are the crop to get in the ground. Number 25. Runner beans. If there's one crop that defines the British allotment, it's runner beans. They're tall, showy with their bright red or white flowers, and they produce an almost absurd quantity of beans if you keep harvesting them. A single plant can give you 2 to 3 kilos of beans over a 10-week period, so if you plant even just 6 or 8, you're looking at more beans than your family can eat fresh, which means you'll be freezing batches for winter. Runner beans absolutely love British weather. They perform better in cool, damp summers than they do in blazing heat, which is exactly why they're such a reliable crop here. They climb, so they occupy hardly any ground space, just vertical space on a frame or trellis, and they keep producing as long as you keep picking. The moment you let the pods grow old and tough, the plant assumes it's completed its job and stops flowering. But if you harvest regularly, it'll keep churning out beans right up until the first hard frost. Fresh runner beans are miles better than anything you'll find in a shop. Picked young and cooked lightly, they've got a tender, almost sweet crunch that makes them worth growing even if you think you're not a fan of beans. Number 24. Courgettes. This is the crop that turns people into reluctant vegetable donors because one plant produces so many courgettes that you'll be giving bags away to neighbors. A single courgette plant will give you 3 to 4 fruits every single week throughout the summer, and most families only need 1 or 2 plants. A packet of courgette seeds costs around £2 and contains about 8 seeds. If you planted all of them, you'd be harvesting well over 100 courgettes in a season, which would cost you over £150 to buy from a supermarket. Obviously, most people don't need that many, but the value is staggering. Courgettes are also dead simple to grow. You plant them after the last frost, give them plenty of space because they sprawl out quite a bit, water them regularly, and then just wait. Within weeks, you'll have more courgettes than you know what to do with. They work in stir-fries, pasta dishes, bakes, soups, cakes, or you can slice them, blanch them, and freeze them for use during winter. People joke about courgette gluts, but when food prices are climbing the way they are, it's actually a fantastic problem to have. If you only grow one thing this year, make it courgettes. They're the ultimate beginner crop, and they'll prove to you very quickly that growing your own food genuinely works. Number 23. French beans. French beans, sometimes called dwarf beans, are a brilliant alternative to runner beans if you've got limited space or you're growing in containers. They don't climb like runners, they stay compact and bushy, which makes them perfect for pots, window boxes, or small raised beds. They're faster to produce than runner beans, often ready to pick within 8 weeks of sowing, and they're just as productive if you keep harvesting. A single plant will give you a decent handful of beans, so if you grow 10 or 12, you'll have more than enough for fresh eating. And freezing, French beans are also incredibly easy for beginners. Sow them directly into warm soil after the last frost. Keep them watered, and they'll do the rest. The beans are slender, tender, and delicious steamed or stir-fried, and because they're so quick, you can do successional sowings every few weeks to keep a constant supply coming. They're a great crop for people who want fresh beans but don't have the space or the inclination to build tall supports for climbers. Number 22. Winter squash. Winter squash, which includes varieties like butternut, are fantastic because they store for months without refrigeration. A single plant can produce 4 to 6 squash, each weighing 2 to 4 pounds. And once they're cured properly, they'll sit in a cool room from autumn all the way through to spring. That's months of having squash on hand for soups, roasts, curries, or bakes without buying any. Winter squash need a bit of warmth to do well, so they're best grown in a sunny, sheltered spot or even in a greenhouse if you've got one. They sprawl quite a bit, but you can train them to grow vertically up a strong support if space is tight. The flavor of homegrown squash is miles better than shop-bought because you're picking them fully ripe, and they're one of those crops that make you feel like you're storing actual food for winter, which is incredibly satisfying. They're not difficult to grow, they just need warmth, space, and regular watering, and in return, they give you a proper harvest that lasts for months. Number 21. Leeks. Leeks are one of the best winter vegetables you can grow because they're incredibly hardy and they'll sit in the ground waiting for you to harvest them whenever you need them. They take a while to grow, usually around 5 to 6 months from planting to harvest, but once they're ready, they'll tolerate frost, snow, and freezing temperatures without any problem. You just pull them up as you need them throughout winter and early spring. Leeks are brilliant for soups, stews, pies, or just braised as a side dish, and they're a traditional British crop that's been grown in gardens and allotments for centuries. They do need transplanting when they're young, which is a bit more work than some crops, but once they're in the ground and established, they're completely reliable. If you want fresh vegetables from the garden during the coldest months of the year, leeks are one of the best options. Number 20. Beetroot. Beetroot is fantastic because you get 2 crops from one plant. The roots are sweet, earthy, and delicious roasted, pickled, or grated raw into salads. And the leaves are edible too, tasting similar to spinach. Beetroot is very easy to grow, tolerates poor soil better than most vegetables, and is ready to harvest in about 8 to 10 weeks. You can pick them small for tender, sweet roots, or leave them to grow larger for roasting or storing. Beetroot is also quite hardy, so you can sow it from spring right through to midsummer and keep harvesting into autumn. It doesn't need much space, grows happily in containers, and is one of those crops that just gets on with it without asking for much attention. If you want a reliable, nutritious crop that gives you both roots and greens, beetroot is a solid choice. Number 19. Parsnips. Parsnips are a traditional British root vegetable that stores brilliantly and actually tastes better after the first frost because the cold converts some of the starches into sugars, making them sweeter. They take a long time to grow, usually around 4 to 5 months, but they're incredibly low maintenance. You sow them in spring, keep them weeded, and then just leave them alone until autumn or winter. Parsnips can stay in the ground all winter, so you harvest them as you need them, which means you've got fresh roots available even in January or February. They're perfect for roasting, mashing, or adding to stews, and they're a crop that feels very connected to old-fashioned British cooking. They're not flashy or fast, but they're reliable, and they give you food during the months when not much else is growing. Number 18. Radishes. Radishes are the fastest vegetable you can grow, ready to harvest in as little as 3 to 4 weeks from sowing. That makes them absolutely brilliant for beginners because you see results almost immediately, which is incredibly motivating. Radishes don't need much space at all. They'll grow in tiny containers, window boxes, or tucked in between slower-growing crops, and you can sow them successionally every couple of weeks from spring to autumn for a continuous supply. They're crunchy, peppery, and great in salads, or just eaten fresh with a bit of salt. Radishes aren't a crop that'll save you huge amounts of money because you don't eat massive quantities of them, but they're fantastic for building confidence and teaching you how easy growing food can actually be. They're also brilliant for kids because the seeds are big enough to handle easily and the results come so quickly that children don't lose interest. Number 17. Spring onions. Spring onions, also called scallions, are another fast-growing crop that's perfect for successional sowing. They're ready in about 8 to 10 weeks. They take up almost no space, and you can tuck them in between other plants or grow them in small containers. Fresh spring onions from the supermarket come in bunches that cost around £1, and if you use them regularly in salads, stir-fries, or as a garnish, that cost adds up. A packet of spring onion seeds costs about £2 if you sow them in batches throughout the season. They're incredibly easy, completely unfussy, and they give you a steady supply of fresh, mild onions for months. They're not a major staple, but they're a useful crop that adds value and variety without taking up resources. Number 16. Salad leaves and cut-and-come-again greens. If there's one single crop that'll save you the most money in the shortest time, it's salad. A bag of mixed salad leaves in a supermarket costs around £2 and lasts maybe 3 or 4 days before it starts going slimy. If you're buying salad twice a week, that's over £200 a year just on bagged leaves. A packet of mixed salad seeds costs about £2 and contains enough to sow repeatedly throughout the season, giving you fresh salad for months. You can grow salad in containers, window boxes, raised beds, or straight in the ground, and it's ready to pick in just 3 to 4 weeks. Because it's cut and come again, you just snip off the outer leaves and the plant keeps producing more from the center. Sow a small batch every 2 or 3 weeks from early spring through to autumn, and you'll have a constant supply of fresh salad on your doorstep. Rocket, lettuce, mizuna, spinach, mustard greens, whatever mix you like, they all grow the same way, fast, simple, and endlessly productive. Salad leaves are also one of the easiest crops for complete beginners because the results come so quickly. Within a month of sowing your first seeds, you're eating something you grew yourself, and that's a genuinely powerful moment. It proves the whole thing works, and it motivates you to keep going. Number 15. Fresh herbs. This is one of the biggest money savers on the entire list, and most people don't even realize how much they're being overcharged. Supermarket herb pots cost around £2 each, and they're deliberately grown in a way that makes them fall apart within a week or two. They're forced under artificial lights, given too much nitrogen to make them look lush and green, and they can't cope with normal growing conditions once you get them home. If you're buying basil, parsley, and coriander every couple of weeks, you're spending £40 to £60 a year on herbs alone, and that's a conservative estimate. Growing your own costs almost nothing. A packet of basil seeds is around 50p and contains 200 seeds. Even if you only successfully grow 10 plants, that's still 10 plants that'll keep you in fresh basil all summer for half the price of a single supermarket pot. Perennial herbs are even better value. Rosemary, thyme, sage, and chives are plants you buy once and they come back every single year for a decade or more. A small rosemary plant costs about £3 and will give you fresh rosemary whenever you need it for the next 10 years. Thyme and sage are the same, completely drought-tolerant, incredibly low maintenance, and they just sit there producing leaves year after year. Herbs are one of those things where the supermarket is quietly ripping you off, and because it's only a couple of pounds here and there, most people don't add it up and realize how much it costs over time. Growing herbs is also absurdly easy. Stick them in pots on a sunny windowsill, by the back door, or in the garden, water them occasionally, and you're sorted. Basil and parsley are annuals, so you'll need to sow them each year, but perennial herbs are genuinely plant once and forget. Number 14. Strawberries. Everyone loves strawberries, and most people assume they're difficult or expensive to grow. They're neither. Strawberry plants cost around £3 each, and once they're established, they send out runners, which are baby plants that root themselves and give you more strawberries for free. One plant becomes 5, 5 becomes 20, and before long, you've got strawberries all over the place. A decent strawberry patch will give you enough fruit to eat fresh for weeks in summer, and you can freeze the surplus or turn it into jam. Strawberries work brilliantly in containers, so even if you've only got a balcony or patio, you can still grow them. Fresh strawberries from the supermarket are expensive, often £3 to £4 for a small punnet, and they're frequently tasteless because they've been bred to survive long-distance transport rather than to taste good. Homegrown strawberries are sweet, juicy, and bursting with flavour, and they're ready to pick at the peak of ripeness rather than being picked unripe and ripened artificially in transit. Strawberries are one of those crops that make you realise just how much better fresh food can taste when it's actually fresh. Number 13. Blackcurrants. Blackcurrants are ridiculously easy to grow and insanely productive once they get going. An established bush can produce up to 10 pounds of fruit every year, and blackcurrants are absolutely packed with vitamin C, more than almost any other fruit you can grow. They're also one of the very few fruit bushes that actually tolerate shade, so if you've got a corner of the garden that doesn't get much sun, blackcurrants will probably grow there just fine. Fresh blackcurrants are almost impossible to find in supermarkets, and when you do find them, they're expensive. Most of what's available is frozen or turned into cordials like ribena. But if you grow your own, you can make your own cordials, jams, syrups, or just freeze them for adding to smoothies and desserts. Blackcurrants are very British, very traditional, and incredibly forgiving. They don't need much attention, they produce heavily, and they keep going strong for 15 years or more. If you want a fruit bush that genuinely earns its space in the garden, blackcurrants are it. Number 12. Gooseberries. Gooseberries are brilliant for British gardens because they're almost indestructible. They don't mind if your garden faces north, they'll tolerate heavy clay soil, and they'll produce fruit even if you mostly ignore them. A single gooseberry bush can give you several kilos of berries every July, and they're perfect for making crumbles, pies, jams, or fool, or even eating fresh if you like them tart and sharp. You almost never see fresh gooseberries in supermarkets anymore, which is a shame because they're a proper traditional British fruit. But that also means when you grow them, you're getting something you genuinely can't just pop to the shops and buy. Gooseberries are one of the easiest fruit bushes to grow. Plant them mulch around the base to suppress weeds, give them a light prune in winter to keep them tidy, and that's about all they ask. They'll fruit reliably for years and years, and they're one of those crops that make you feel like you're doing proper old-fashioned gardening. Number 11. Raspberries. Fresh raspberries in the supermarket are shockingly expensive. A small punnet can easily cost £3 or £4, and half the time the berries are already starting to go mushy by the time you get them home because they're so delicate. Raspberry canes, on the other hand, cost around £5 each, and once they're planted, they'll produce fruit for 10 years or more. A single cane will give you a good handful of berries, so if you plant even just 4 or 5 canes, you're looking at enough fruit to eat fresh, freeze for winter, or turn into jam. Raspberries do need a bit of structure, usually some posts and horizontal wires to tie the canes to, but once that's set up, they're fairly low maintenance. They spread by sending up new canes from their roots, which actually works in your favor because it means more fruit over time. There are summer fruiting and autumn fruiting varieties, and if you plant both, you can be harvesting fresh raspberries from June all the way through to October. That's months of berries without spending another penny, and the flavor is miles better than anything from a shop because you're picking them at peak ripeness. Raspberries are one of those crops that feel like a luxury, but once you've got them established, they're just there every year, quietly producing fruit while you get on with everything else. Number 10. Purple sprouting broccoli. Purple sprouting broccoli is a fantastic winter crop because it produces tender stems and small florets in late winter and early spring, right when there's almost nothing else ready to harvest. It takes a long time to grow. You're looking at nearly a year from sowing to harvest, but the payoff is a crop that's available during the hungry gap when fresh vegetables are at their most expensive in the shops. Purple sprouting broccoli is quite hardy. It'll tolerate hard frosts, and the flavor actually improves after it's been through cold weather. It's also expensive to buy because it's only available for a short season, so growing your own makes a real difference. It needs a fair bit of space and a long growing season, so it's not the best choice for total beginners, but if you've got room and you want fresh greens in February and March, it's worth planting. Number 9. Perpetual spinach. Perpetual spinach, also called leaf beet, is much easier to grow than regular spinach because it doesn't bolt and run to seed in hot weather the way true spinach does. It's a cut-and-come-again crop, so you pick the outer leaves and the plant keeps producing more from the center, and it'll keep going from late spring right through autumn and often into winter if the weather's mild. The leaves taste very similar to spinach, and you use them the same way in salads when they're young or cooked in stir-fries, curries, or as a side dish when they're larger. Perpetual spinach is incredibly easy, doesn't need much space, and is far more reliable than regular spinach. It's one of those crops that just quietly gets on with producing leaves for months without needing much from you. Number 8. Chard. Chard, especially rainbow chard with its brightly coloured stems, is another brilliant cut-and-come-again green that's expensive in shops but grows like an absolute weed in British gardens. It's hardy, productive, and it looks beautiful, so it works as an ornamental plant as well as a food crop. You can start harvesting leaves within 8 weeks of sowing, and the plant will keep producing from late spring right through to the first hard frosts, and sometimes beyond if you protect it with a bit of fleece. The leaves are great cooked, and the stems can be eaten too, either steamed or stir-fried. Chard is one of those vegetables that's always expensive in the supermarket because it doesn't last long after it's been cut, but when you grow it yourself, you just snip off what you need and leave the rest on the plant, so it stays fresh. It's very easy, doesn't need much attention, and gives you months of greens from a single sowing. Number 7. Kale. Kale has become trendy in the last decade or so, but it's actually one of the oldest and hardiest vegetables you can grow. It's incredibly nutritious, absolutely packed with vitamins, and it's one of the toughest crops in the garden. Kale will sit there through snow, ice, and freezing winds, and it'll still give you fresh leaves to pick all winter long. In fact, the flavor improves after frost because the cold triggers the plant to convert starches into sugars, making the leaves sweeter and less bitter. You can sow kale in spring for a summer and autumn harvest, or sow it in summer for a winter crop, and either way, it's remarkably easy to grow. You just need to keep an eye out for caterpillars in summer, but other than that, it's almost completely trouble-free. A few kale plants will give you more than enough leaves for a family, and because it's a cut-and-come-again crop, you just take what you need and the plant keeps producing. Kale is expensive in the shops, especially the trendy varieties like Cavolo Nero, and it doesn't last well in the fridge, so growing your own makes a lot of sense. Number 6. Jerusalem artichokes. Jerusalem artichokes are strange, knobbly tubers that most people have never heard of, but they're incredibly productive and almost impossible to get wrong. You plant one tuber in spring, and by autumn, you're digging up 5 to 10 pounds of new tubers from that one plant. They store in the ground all winter, so you just dig them up whenever you need them, and they taste like a cross between a potato and an artichoke, nutty and slightly sweet. They're brilliant roasted, in soups, or mashed. The best part is, they're perennial and extremely vigorous perennials at that. Even if you dig up most of them, you'll always miss a few small tubers, and those will regrow the following year. In fact, the bigger challenge is stopping them from spreading too much rather than getting them to grow. They're not a crop you'll eat every single day, but they're a solid winter staple that takes almost zero effort once they're established, and they'll keep producing year after year without you needing to replant. Number 5. Asparagus. Asparagus is the ultimate long-term investment crop. It takes patience because you don't harvest anything for the first 2 or 3 years while the plants get established, but once they start producing, they'll keep going for 15 to 25 years without needing to be replanted. Every spring, the spears push up through the soil, and you get 6 to 8 weeks of fresh asparagus, which costs around £4 or £5 a bunch in the shops. An asparagus bed doesn't take up a huge amount of space, and once it's established, it's virtually maintenance-free. You harvest the spears in spring, then you leave the plants alone for the rest of the year to grow tall and ferny, which builds up energy in the roots for next year's crop. Asparagus is one of those crops that makes you feel like a proper gardener because it's a genuine commitment, but the payoff is decades of fresh asparagus every spring, which is an excellent return on a small initial investment. Number 4. Rhubarb. Rhubarb is the most British perennial crop you can grow, and it's also one of the easiest and most reliable. You plant a crown, which costs around £5, and after a year or two of establishment, it'll start producing thick, tart stems every spring for the next 20 years or more, possibly even longer. Rhubarb absolutely loves British weather. It thrives in cool, damp conditions, and it basically takes care of itself. You don't need to water it, you don't need to feed it, you just let it grow and harvest the stems when they're thick enough, usually from April through to June. Rhubarb is brilliant for crumbles, jams, compotes, or stewing down with a bit of sugar to serve with yogurt or ice cream. It's also one of those crops that connects you to traditional British gardening. Your grandparents almost certainly had rhubarb in their garden. And there's something deeply satisfying about continuing that tradition. Once rhubarb is in, it's just there, coming back every single spring, giving you armfuls of stems without asking for anything in return. It's the ultimate example of planting once and winning for decades. Number 3. Garlic chives are a perennial version of regular chives, and they taste slightly of garlic, which makes them brilliant in stir-fries and Asian dishes. They're just as easy as regular chives and come back every year. Mint is almost too easy to grow. It's incredibly vigorous and will take over if you let it, so it's best grown in a pot to keep it contained. But a pot of mint gives you fresh leaves for teas, cocktails, sauces, and cooking for years. Oregano is another perennial herb that's fantastic for Italian and Mediterranean cooking, and it's completely drought-tolerant once established. Marjoram is similar to oregano and grows just as easily. Number 2. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are worth talking about because they're one of those crops where the difference between homegrown and supermarket is absolutely night and day. A cherry tomato plant can produce over 200 fruits in a season, and the flavor is so much better than shop-bought, but it genuinely doesn't seem like the same vegetable. They're not impossible to grow outdoors, especially if you're in the south and you choose varieties bred for cooler climates. If you've got the right conditions though, a packet of seeds for about £2 will give you enough plants to keep your family in fresh tomatoes all summer, and you can turn the surplus into homemade ketchup, salsa, pasta sauce that'll store for months. Cherry tomatoes are the easiest because they ripen faster and cope better with unpredictable weather than the large beefsteak types. Just know that this is one crop where success depends quite heavily on having the right setup, so don't feel like you've failed if they struggle outdoors in a typical British summer. Number 1. Horseradish is one of those perennial crops that's so vigorous it's almost a problem. You plant one root, and within a couple of years you'll have horseradish spreading all over the place because it's nearly impossible to get rid of once it's established. But that's actually brilliant if you like fresh horseradish, because it means you've got a permanent supply without ever needing to buy another root. Fresh horseradish from the garden is worlds apart from the stuff in jars. You dig up a root, peel it, and mix it with a bit of vinegar and cream, and you've got proper horseradish sauce for roast beef or smoked fish. It's incredibly easy to grow, tolerates almost any soil, and asks for absolutely nothing from you. The only real consideration is planting it somewhere you're happy for it to stay, because once it's in for good. If you've ever paid £5 or £6 for a tiny jar of decent horseradish sauce, you'll appreciate having a plant that gives you fresh root whenever you need it for the next decade or more. Right, so there you have it. 30 crops that British people can grow at home that'll actually make a difference to how much you're spending at supermarkets every week. This isn't about becoming completely self-sufficient overnight or turning your back garden into a commercial farm. It's about taking back even a small piece of control over where your food comes from and what you're putting on your family's plates. Every courgette you grow is one you didn't hand over £2 for. Every bunch of herbs you snip from a pot by the back door is money that stayed in your pocket instead of going to Tesco. Every punnet of strawberries you pick from your own plants is a small victory against a system that's been designed to keep you dependent. And when enough people start doing this, when enough families begin growing even just a few things, the supermarkets will feel it. Their entire business model is built on you walking through their doors week after week, and when you stop doing that, even partially, it affects their bottom line. That's when they're forced to change, to offer better value, to treat farmers more fairly, to stop prioritizing profit over everything else. So if this video has helped you, if you're thinking about planting even 1 or 2 of these crops, hit that hype button one more time. Share this with someone who's tired of watching their food bill climb every month. Leave a comment and tell me which food we should cover next, because there's so much more to expose about what's really going on with the food system in this country. And if you want more videos like this, ones that actually give you practical ways to take back control instead of just complaining about the problem, then subscribe, because there's plenty more coming. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and protect your plate.